Marvel Snap just did their most controversial OTA of all time. It should be no surprise that there are hot takes aplenty. Let's get into it. Probably not groundbreaking or hot of a take, but they should keep the Shang-Chi one. There's only one that seems to make sense to me, whereas the others are bad to a point that I wonder if this whole OTA was just to gauge a different Shang, and every other tech is just collateral. When you look at the stats so far on Untapped, I don't think they support this idea. Shang-Chi has like a pretty significantly negative cube rate since the patch. Like, this is pretty clearly nerfing the card past the realm of usefulness. I think that in a world where maybe they were like going to buff Valkyrie to 4 cost, then you could have a conversation about this iteration of Shang-Chi. But if they did that, Valkyrie would just become the new Shang-Chi and Shang-Chi would become useless. And I'm not really sure whether that would be a good thing to do, generally speaking. So when I see this take, I think largely, like, I think the Shang-Chi change is like cool and interesting in that it adds dynamism to the gameplay. But I also think it probably nerfs him too far such that he will no longer be a meaningful card. The card is just bad right now, and I think it is probably bad to have that card be as unrewarding to put in your deck as it is in the current situation. Given that, yes, it is a powerful card, it was already not that great going into it. We've had years of playing around Shang-Chi and deck building. I think we're kind of used to it by now. He's probably the least offensive of these tech cards when you evaluate at a high-level meta conception of this. I personally do not believe that Shang-Chi is going to stay in this form. I don't think it's like a huge loss for the metagame, but I generally would say that as of right now, I would say it is one of my less likely to stay this way, just because of how bad it is. I think that the text on Shang-Chi, maybe we can work with that. The text on Killmonger, maybe we can work with that. But I think if you want them to stay in their current form, I think it is quite a bad idea. Tech slop is killing this game. Devs get tired of tech temporarily. They're killing their own game. You can't please Snap players. I think this is more just a consequence of how the internet is. When you think about, like, different groups of people with different feelings, the people who are feeling aggrieved, the people who are angry, who want to voice their discontent, those are the people who go on the internet and try to talk about the game, right? So it's not that you can't please Snap players, because it's largely, I would suspect, not the same two groups of people saying this. It's more that the internet is a fundamental conduit of negative sentiment. Whether or not you were someone, I don't think people are flip-flopping back and forth between what they think. I think that the people that got what they want aren't very loud anymore because they got what they want. Why would you go on the website where you complain about stuff, twitter.com, and not complain about something? What are you going to do? Be like, great job? That's just not how people use the internet. So I don't think it's like the same groups of people. I just think that you have to understand that, like, a lot of internet discourse is filtered through this vast amount of negativity. Like, what happens, I think, is that people are so used to this fundamentally negative perspective that in order to make their complaint stand out, they go to an even more negative space, right? Like, it is in order for you to get noticed, to get interacted with, attention is sort of the currency of the internet, right? And so when you escalate your rhetoric and then people respond to that escalation by interacting with you, you're being incentivized to continue escalating your rhetoric, right? And so I think that that is largely what you're noticing here. It's just that whoever's mad, they're the people who are loud and getting engaged with because they are loud. It's not that, you know, the same guy was like, they should nerf all the tech, and then they nerfed all the tech, and that guy was like, how dare they nerf all the tech? It's very different people. A heads up that they were doing an imbalance patch would have made it something to look forward to. Having it surprise dropped on us for 2 weeks of the meta just sucks. It is a meaningless experiment mostly, during a meaningful time for some players, climbs, and LTGMs. Okay, there's two parts to this. The first is I do think their communication on this could have used a little punching up. And there are a couple of aspects where I think the communication of this experiment failed. And One of them is I genuinely think that they need to understand that, and this is something that I am very conscious of when I work in spaces related to the wider Marvel Snap community. And I don't mean this as a slight to the Marvel Snap community. We don't read. And I don't mean like, oh my God, the Marvel Snap community is so stupid and they don't read. I mean like when I see a Discord announcement and it is longer than 3 sentences, I'm skimming. Like I'm sorry, that's just how my brain works. This happened a lot with Golden Gauntlet. I was constantly giving the people running Golden Gauntlet the feedback of like, you need to say exactly what you want to say in the first sentence. Otherwise, because if like they were doing all these like long explainers of rules and things like that, it's like nobody will read that. They will not get past the first sentence. So if you're trying to convey something to somebody, put it in the first sentence, put it in the title. That's where we read, right? And I think that like largely, if you actually sat down and read all the patch notes and were like, oh, I'm going to read the patch notes about this, that would be one thing, but this is a mobile game that is extremely simplified. It's built to make you not have to read. Like, compared to other card games, this is a card game where you're not supposed to have to read stuff. And so when you log on to Marvel Snap and you just see all the changes there, and there's not even a thing for you to read, like you'd have to click out of the app to go read it, or click into like the part of the app no one really goes in, which is the part that doesn't have a play button attached to it to like read the patch notes and then get that it's a joke. I think you can argue that like, I don't want to be too rude to me and my own viewers, but they kind of just have to dumb it down. Like they like talk to us like children, talk to us like we're stupid, because a lot of us are. And frankly, I think they relied on their audience having like a much better ability to like understand jokes from a game developer. And I don't know if we live in a world where you can do that anymore. Like, I think a lot of what scares me about being a sort of internet public figure is that I've learned over the time that I've done this job just how easy it is to take something out of context, interpret it in the least charitable way possible, and then post it in that context to other people who have no idea that that's not what you were saying or intending to say. I think largely I've learned a lot about ideologically motivated point of view attempts at, gotchaing people, right? And I think that if you are making content in 2025, and this includes the developers, you kind of need to be like really obvious about what you're doing. And I get that if you read the patch notes, you were like, okay, that's a hack. They're getting hacked. That's funny. But like, they probably did actually need to say, we're going to do something funny here. Expect weird things. Like, maybe even more explicitly, just tell us what's going to happen. And I think that kind of sucks, because I would like if they were able to be rewarded for being clever. But I just don't think you can be clever in this space. I just don't think you can do it. Keep doing big OTAs like this one. The old method of 1 or 2 problem cards and a few point changes, IMO, burnt people out of the game, as most changes kept the metagame pretty much where it's been, and doing the same thing over and over will get pretty much all non-sweats and casuals over it. I think what's fascinating about this is I don't really, like, a lot of people were doomsaying about this metagame, like the post-OTA metagame. Like, oh my God, it's going to be so terrible. It's just going to be points. And I think largely the things that have kept it from being that are the continued existence of Stardust and Mobius, right? Because it turns out there's actually a limit to how much point vomit you can do if people still have functional ways to prevent you from spawning a bunch of shit on the board or making all of your shit cost 0, right? So that's been really fascinating to me. Like, people have looked at it like Shang-Chi is the limiter on this, and he's not. He's much more the limiter on something like a Surtur than he is a limiter on something like 1 billion points on the board. And that's really something striking to me. Like, I expected, and I think a lot of people expected, the metagame to look a certain way, but because the tech cards for Hela and Negative and Nimrod still all exist, it just hasn't. And I think that, like, a lot of people were like, oh, this is a big swing that's going to change things dramatically. I've actually been surprised by how little things have changed, honestly. This whole conversation, like as weird as it sounds, is I want to write a love letter to Mobius and Stardust and just thank them for not letting this get as stupid as it could have been, because this could have been what everyone was afraid it was going to be, and it just hasn't been so far, in large part thanks to the fact that those two cards are still around and doing things. And on one level, maybe it's a failure that your anti-tech card experiment was one that was largely defined by the existence of other tech cards, because that is sort of where my head is at right now. But on another level, it's a massive success that you did like a bunch of tech card nerfs in the metagame didn't immediately turn into an amorphous blob of points. About time they took a big swing. I'd like to see them take more risks like this. I think this is expressing largely the same opinion as the previous, but I think it is interesting because it depends on what you mean by risks. Like, I think what they should do is take risks in a positive way. They should like buff cards that just came out in a like less trepidatious way than they have been, right? They should go take Dormammu and they should be like, Dormammu has 20 power now. That's what I want them to do. I want them to take as big of a positive swing on like a Dormammu or a Morgan Le Fay or a Cosmic Ghost Rider as they did as a negative swing on like a Killmonger. You know what I mean? When they make these cards that are cool and unique and new, and I don't think I'm alone in saying that I think a lot of their newer designs are super, super cool. I think they should be willing to do the opposite of this and be like, we're going to ask every designer on the team for their favorite card. And then we're just going to buff that card a bunch. And we're just going to see what happens. I would almost find that more not like useful, but I would find that kind of metagame more compelling for a 2-week experiment. You know what I mean? Obviously, I don't think they should do this all the time, but I'd be more interested in a world where they were like, okay, so here's what we did. Morgan Le Fay says +5 on it now. Dormammu is 20 power. And just go down the line of like cool cards that are build-arounds that they've done. You know, we're reverting the nerf to Havoc. We're reverting the nerf to Fantasticar. We're just going to like, every card that's released for the last 6 months that you guys have called mid, we're going to be like, what's up? It has 5 extra power right now. And, you know, maybe that's stupid, right? But I do feel like one of the things that Marvel Snap has been missing, and some of this is because of tech, is power in cool places. There's so much power in cards that stop people from doing things, and that is half of it. But I don't think there's enough power in cards that are asking you to do things in a weird way, in a different way. And I think that that would be a good thing for them to do if they learn anything from this other than don't take big swings. Keep Enchantress at a 5 cost, preferably at 5/9. As a card that is supposed to take out and effectively flip an ongoing lane, 5 cost feels more impactful, and the extra power goes a long way. Kind of feels like what Cosmic Ghost Rider should have been. I'll give you another reason why this is true. Because it creates a meaningful distinction between Rogue and Enchantress. Enchantress so often at 4 cost is just like good enough that you'll play it, and you're doing it really to like hit one ongoing, right? Like that's what you're kind of hoping for. It's like you're not going to like hit, every game's not going to be Living Tribunal, but you might be able to like blow up your opponent's Gore, or blow up your Iron Man, or blow up their Darkhawk, or their Ronin, or whatever, right? Like you're looking to hit just like something. Maybe I'll hit your V-Hand or your Quinjet. It's like I'm not really using Enchantress to her full capacity of hitting all of the ongoings in a lane. And because she's only 1 more cost than Rogue, and only and has like a decent amount more power, because a lot of the time, one of the fundamental things about Rogue is like, unless you're going to be able to use the ongoing, and a lot of ongoings are very specific, you're not getting a lot out of her other than the removal of their ongoing, right? Like, I'm roguing your Morbius. Okay, I mean, I haven't discarded any card. Most of the utility of this card is getting rid of yours and not anything I'm gaining out of this, right? Oh, I'm roguing your Victoria hand. Like, yeah, that's awesome, but unless I'm also a Victoria hand deck, that doesn't do anything beyond removing yours. And so a lot of the use cases for an Enchantress or for a Rogue are the same as the use cases for an Enchantress, but an Enchantress at 5 cost, a lot harder to free roll, suddenly Rogue actually starts maybe seeing play. There's more distance there. So yes, Enchantress to 5/9, Full thumbs up from me. Most everyone who said that this OTA is why I'm going to stop playing Marvel Snap was looking for reasons to quit or had already stopped. This OTA wasn't the nail in the coffin. They were already 1 foot or completely out the door. Okay, so baseline, I don't think you know what nail in the coffin means in this context. It would actually refer to someone who is 1 foot out the door, and then this is in fact the nail in the coffin causing them to take both feet out the door. But I digress. I do think there is a bit of performativeness about this, but I also think that largely this comes down to presentation, right? Like a lot of those takes happened very early before people were clear on what was happening, right? So if you log on to Marvel Snap, and this is your experience of it, right? You log on to Marvel Snap, you see the changelog, you're like, oh my God, these guys are lunatics. And then in order to actually understand that this is like a 2-week thing, that they're doing as an experiment to listen to the community and see what happens, you have to like click through to like another thing and then read all the way to the bottom. It's like, I think a lot of it is once the community started to figure out what this actually was, people were less mad. But there was like 5 hours of, they are actually doing this. They have lost their mind. How dare they, you morons, right? Like there was a lot of that, right? And to me, that is kind of a comms issue. Like there are going to be people who are fundamentally unreachable on this, who will look for any reason to dump on the game and yell about it. I get it. Those people exist. But there are also people who would be in for it if they had it properly explained to them that I think did not have it properly explained to them and thus were angry about it. Got a real duality of man going on here. The meta is much better now and finally went back to actual synergy decks. People whine about strong tech being necessary for ages. Turns out the game is just better when the answers aren't that easy. We won. Contrasted with nerfs to Cannonball, Juggernaut, and Fenris has actually made the meta worse. Even before the recent OTA, the meta became only entirely combo decks that are difficult to interact with, and most games are now determined by stat checks rather than outplaying your opponent. This made me realize Merkball decks were the misunderstood hero, protecting us from the real villain. We just couldn't see it. This is what I mean, right? Like, when I talk about how it's not the same people complaining about everything, for what it's worth, not to be like reddit.com/r/enlightened centrism about this, I do think that the truth is roughly in the middle, that like this game will cater to both types of players and we don't want the game to be samey, right? And multiple ways in which the game can be samey are there's too many powerful tech cards, or the cards I play don't matter because my opponent's cards just went over the top of me and made more numbers than I did, so I feel like I didn't try, or I didn't have any impact on the game. Largely to me, I think tech cards feel a lot more like I am interacting with my opponent. We are both taking game actions. They both matter. Positioning matters, especially a tech card like Shang-Chi. The ones that are particularly odious to me are the ones that break this. So like a Killmonger, for example, my positioning doesn't matter. They had a Killmonger, I lose, GG, whatever, right? Like that kind of sucks. Shang-Chi in one lane, I've always found a little more acceptable than other people were. Cannonball Mercury Fenris was partially unacceptable because it was multi-lane, right? Cannonball Mercury, oh, the biggest thing I played this game didn't matter. Fenris, oh, I lost that other lane because my big guy died, right? Like there is, the more the game becomes about my game actions not mattering, my decisions not mattering, I think the worse it is. And both tech cards and like every deck being Mr. Negative or whatever can do that, right? Like that is basically always been my argument that Hela was bad, is because it was always doing this. Did you have enough stats to interact with me? Nope. Get out. Sorry, nothing mattered. Only thing that mattered is my turn 6, right? That's bad, right? And I think that like the contrapositive of that would be, you know, Sarah Tech being the best deck or whatever, right? But I do think that the truth lies somewhere in the middle, but probably a little bit closer to the Sarah Tech point, because Sarah Tech has almost never actually been the best deck for very good reasons, which are mostly related to the fact that it doesn't have enough points when you don't have access to the tech actually mattering, so it always gets farmed by whatever other mid-range deck is just doing points better and not getting Shang-Chi'd, whereas Hela actually, that actually has been the best deck and it has been terrible, right? So if you ask me, if you like on a spectrum from Sarah Tech to Hela, I would say we should probably be like if you imagine Saratech as 0 and Hela as 100, I would say we should be at like a 40, I guess. I'm not nonpartisan in this regard. But I think it's important to note that like the issue is largely the same. Oh, look at all this stuff I did. Oh, my opponent played Shang-Chi. Guess none of it matters, right? The issue is the same, that people, like, the parts of the game stop mattering. Yeah? And I think that is something that can be addressed in multiple ways and has to be addressed in multiple ways, because the game constantly telling you none of this actually matters means you probably stop playing the game. For the people who refuse to understand tech cards, disruptive interaction isn't a flaw in card games, it's what makes them more dynamic. If your strategy collapses under minimal disruption, the issue might be rigidity, not balance. I mean, I do think that largely the issue is the feeling of taking game actions being totally irrelevant. And I think a lot of card games struggle with this, right? Like when I was playing Hearthstone, I was talking to a couple of Hearthstone pros and I was like, how many games do you think are just like over from like turn 3 or whatever, but you have to play out the remaining 14 turns anyway, just in case your opponent like messes up or whatever? Like that feeling is bad. And I think part of what Snap gets really right is that the games are short and you know that the games are over when they're over. You have this retreat mechanic built in. You can minimize your losses, all of that. A lot of what Snap gets right is minimizing that feeling. But there are still situations where you feel like, oh, I spent 5 turns building my board progressively, which is a thing that should be rewarded in games. Like I put effort into like A, B, C, D, E, and then my opponent just played something on turn 6 that made all of my effort totally pointless and worthless, right? And I think that is largely the flashpoint that people who don't like tech cards orient around. I think it's not a coincidence that you have these cards that are getting nerfed being the ones that have cube equity attached to them. These are the ones that happen on the final turn of the game and stop other things from mattering, right? They didn't nerf Mobius. They didn't nerf Stardust because that's there. That's on the board. You can see it. You can play around it or you can retreat. These cards are not that, and I am sympathetic to the people who hate them. I agree disruptive interaction is probably important, but I do think that it's better in a game like Marvel Snap if your disruptive interaction is face up on the board, because that allows people to make meaningful decisions in the face of it. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching and for submitting your takes. I tweeted that out very late last night. I was worried I wouldn't get enough responses. I did not need to be worried. People have a lot of takes. As always, I have been KMBest. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.